Quesada Modville from the Brown Middle School Library, and this is episode 2 of our Brown Bear Book Talks. In today's episode, I am going to tell you about a bunch of historical fiction books. In each of these books, there are some pretty big changes that the character goes through fairly early on in the book, and how they react to those changes, how they move forward from them, really comes to be much of the story and defining moments for these characters. So I hope you enjoy them, and as always, these books are either available to borrow or read freely online, and I'll include more details in the description. The first few books I'm going to tell you about are all novels in verse, meaning that the text is written in the form of poetry, but it works together to tell one cohesive story. Out of the Dust by Karen Hesse is a Newbery Medal-winning novel in verse. This book explores the life of 14-year-old Billie Jo. She is growing up in the Dust Bowls of Oklahoma, and early in the book she describes the thin layer of dust that just covers everything in her house, and how the Dust Bowl and the Depression has affected her family. Billie Jo and her family are just trying to make it through what is already this difficult time, and then there is a terrible accident that further transforms Billie Jo's life. It scars her inside and out. Her mother is gone. Her father can't bear to talk about it. And the one thing that might make her feel better, playing piano, is impossible because her hands are wounded from that accident. The dust storms continue to devastate the family farm and all of the farms nearby. Many have fled the area, and Billie Jo and her family are left in the bleak landscape of Oklahoma just trying to get through. Out of the Dust by Karen Hesse. In Siege by Roxanne Orgill, we step back to Boston at the beginning of the Revolution. We are in British-held Boston. We hear the voices of citizens, militiamen, and redcoats. In Siege by Roxanne Orgill, it's the summer of 1775. The British occupy Boston and its busy harbor. They hold residents captive and keep a strong military foothold. There's the threat of smallpox, and the town is cut off, even from food and medical supplies. Following the battles of Lexington and Concord, Congress unanimously elects George Washington Commander-in-Chief of the American Armed Forces. He is sent to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to transform this ragtag collection of volunteer militiamen into America's first army. So far, the war is nothing more than a series of intermittent skirmishes, but Washington is in constant fear of attack, until he takes the offensive with results that surprise everyone, the British most of all. Roxanne Orgill uses verse to zoom in on the siege of Boston that launched the war to defeat the British. She gives voice to privates and generals, their wives, city residents, all come together to tell a story that is usually overlooked in Revolutionary War history. Back matter, so the content at the back of the book include notes, glossaries, and an extensive bibliography if you want to learn more. Siege by Roxanne Orgill. Lifeboat 12 by Susan Hood is a novel in verse based on true events that tell the story of a boy's harrowing experience on a lifeboat after surviving a torpedo attack during World War II. At the book's start, Nazis are bombing London every night, and it's time for 13-year-old Ken to escape. He suspects that his stepmother is glad to see him go, but his dad insists that he is one of the lucky ones. Ken is one of 90 boys and girls to ship out aboard the SS City of Benares to safety in Canada. Life aboard the luxury ship is grand. There are 9-course meals, Ken is making new friends, and he has a life far from the bombs, the rations, and his stepmom's glare. After 5 days at sea, the ship's officers announce that they are out of danger. But they're wrong. Late that night, an explosion hurls Ken from his bunk. They've been hit, torpedoed. The Benares is sinking fast. Terrified, Ken scrambles aboard lifeboat number 12 with 5 other boys. Will they get away? Will they survive? This is based on true events and real people, and Lifeboat 12 is about believing in one another, knowing that only by banding together will we have any chance to survive. History is full of action, and these next books all highlight how exciting history really can be. These are all action-packed, fast-moving stories. The first is Grenade by Alan Gratz, and his books are really popular because they have so much action and the characters are so compelling, and each one has been a true excitement to read. In Grenade, it's 1945 and the world is in the grip of war. Hideki lives on the island of Okinawa near Japan, and when World War II crashes onto his shores, Hideki is drafted into the Blood and Iron Student Corps to fight the Japanese army. Many of the boys that Hideki is drafted with are enthusiastic, but Hideki is doubtful. When he is handed a grenade and a set of instructions, don't come back until you've killed an American soldier, Hideki is afraid and feeling shameful and unsure of how he is going to move forward. This is a multiple perspectives book, and the other is that of Ray, a young American Marine who has just landed in Okinawa. This is his first journey into war. He doesn't know what to expect. He doesn't know if he'll make it out alive. He just knows that the enemy is everywhere. Hideki and Ray each fight their way across the island. They survive heart-pounding ambushes, dangerous traps, but when the two of them collide in the middle of the battle, the choices they make in that instant will change everything. Grenade by Alan Gratz. A Night Divided by Jennifer A. Nielsen was one of our most popular books last year. This Massachusetts Children's Book Award winner is a thrilling historical fiction. At the beginning of the book, Gerda and her family are living in East Berlin. Her father believes that it is time to escape to the West, to a life of greater freedom, while her mother just wants to stay where they are, maintain the status quo, and keep the family safe. While her father and one of her brothers are in West Berlin looking for job opportunities and housing, the Berlin Wall is erected. Gerda, her brother Fritz, and her mother are completely divided from the rest of their family. They're living on the eastern side, controlled by Soviets. Now it has been a few years. Gerda knows that it's dangerous to watch the wall, to think forbidden thoughts of freedom, but she can't help herself. She sees the East German soldiers with their guns trained on their own citizens, and she believes that she, her family, her neighbors, and friends are all prisoners in their own city. Each day on the way to school, Gerda looks up onto the viewing platforms built into the wall. From those platforms, people on the western side could look down into East Berlin to see family members, sometimes treat it as somewhat of a spectacle. And one day Gerda looks up and she knows that she sees her father. And he starts to do this dance. And she and her father used to do this dance each night before she went to bed. And she knows that her father knows the dance just as well as she does, but he is doing it differently. Gerda believes that her father is trying to communicate to her, trying to tell her that there is a way for she and Fritz to get out of East Berlin. So she convinces her brother to help her with her escape plan. If they are caught, the consequences are deadly, and no one can be trusted. Will Gerda and her family find their way to freedom? Read A Night Divided by Jennifer A. Nielsen. In the Heart of a Samurai by Margi Preus. It's 1841, and a Japanese fishing vessel has sunk. Its crew is forced to swim to a small, unknown island, and they're eventually rescued by a passing American ship. But at this point in history, Japan's borders remain closed to all Western nations, even if they are trying to return some Japanese citizens. So the crew sets off for America, and they learn English along the way. Manjiro is a 14-year-old boy. He's curious and eager to learn everything he can about this new English culture. Eventually, the captain adopts Manjiro and takes him to his home in New England. He lives there for some time, but then heads to San Francisco to pan for gold. After many years out living on his own in the world, Manjiro makes his way back to Japan, only to be imprisoned as an outsider. With his hard-won knowledge of the West, though, Manjiro is in a unique position to persuade the shogun to ease and open the boundaries around Japan. He may even achieve his unlikely dream of becoming a samurai. The Heart of a Samurai by Margi Preus. The next few books I'm going to tell you about are recent historical fiction books. Not recent in terms of publication, but recent in terms of the historical events themselves. Since the turn of the 21st century, Our world has changed greatly, and there have been these major events that have helped shape it. Each of these books highlights one of those events and characters that were shaped by them. 910, a September 11th story by Nora Raleigh Baskin. You can ask anyone. September 11th, 2001 was serene and lovely, a perfect day, until a plane struck the World Trade Center. But this story begins a few days earlier. There are 4 kids in different parts of the country who are just going about their lives. Sergio, who lives in Brooklyn, is struggling to come to terms with his absentee father he hates, the grandmother he loves. Will's father is gone too, killed in a car accident that has left the family reeling. Nadira has never before felt uncomfortable about being Muslim, but at her new school she's getting funny looks because of the headscarf that she wears. Amy is also starting a new school in a new city and missing her mom, who has to fly to New York on business. These 4 don't know one another, but their lives are about to intersect in ways they never could have imagined. Nora Raleigh Baskin weaves together their stories in an unforgettable novel about that seemingly perfect September day, the day that our world changed forever. 910, a September 11th story. In Zane and the Hurricane by Rodman Philbrick, we see a gripping, poignant novel about a 12-year-old boy and his dog who become trapped in New Orleans during the horrors of Hurricane Katrina. Zane Dupree is a charismatic 12-year-old boy. He's of mixed race. He's visiting a relative in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hits. Zane is unexpectedly separated from all of his family, and with his dog, he experiences the terror of Katrina's wind, the rain, the horrific flooding. Facing death, they end up being rescued from an attic air vent by a kind, elderly musician and a scrappy young girl, both of whom are black. The chaos that ensues as storm water drowns the city, shelter and food vanish, and police contribute to a dangerous and frightening atmosphere. All of this works together to create a page-turning tale that just completely engrosses the reader. This is based on facts of the worst hurricane disaster in U.S. history, not because it was the biggest natural disaster, but because of the lawlessness and lack of government support during the disaster. But this book also highlights the generosity and courage of those who risk their lives in safety to help others. It is an unforgettable novel of heroism in the face of truly challenging circumstances. Zane and the Hurricane by Rodman Philbrick. Escape from Aleppo by N.H. Senzai. The story begins with Nadia standing at the center of attention in her parents' elegant dining room. She thinks that this is the best day of her life. Everyone is about to sing happy birthday to her. She feels like she is at the beginning of something special. But then her uncle calls from the living room. "Baba, brothers, you need to see this," he calls. Reluctantly, Nadia follows her family into the other room. On TV, a reporter stands near an overturned vegetable cart on a dusty street. Beside it is a mound of smoldering ashes. The reporter explains that a vegetable vendor in the city of Tunis burned himself alive, protesting corrupt government officials who have been harassing his business. Nadia frowns. It's December 17th, 2010, Nadia's 12th birthday and the beginning of the Arab Spring. Soon, anti-government protests erupt across the Middle East, and one by one, countries are thrown into turmoil, a domino effect, setting off events in country after country. As civil war flares in Syria and bombs fall across Nadia's home city of Aleppo, her family decides to flee to safety. The story is inspired by current events, and the novel sheds light on a complicated situation in Syria that has led to an international refugee crisis. And this tells the story of one girl's harrowing journey to safety. Escape from Aleppo by N.H. Senzai. The last few books I'm going to tell you about are all told from multiple perspectives. But not only that, they are also taking place in different timelines. You see stories that are connected in some way, and a couple of the books there might be a tiny bit of magic that connects these stories, inspired by more traditional magical realism, but in each of the books the historical events really impact these characters over time. I don't often include books from the same author in one book talk, but Alan Gratz is just such a powerhouse when it comes to historical fiction. In his book Refugee, we see 3 different perspectives, all with one common mission: escape. Josef is a Jewish boy in 1930s Nazi Germany, and there's the threat of concentration camps looming. He and his family board a ship that is bound for the other side of the world, thinking that they are on their way to safety and freedom. Isabel is a Cuban girl in 1994. There are riots and unrest plaguing Cuba, and she and her family set out on a raft, hoping to find safety and freedom in America. Mahmoud is a Syrian boy in 2015. His homeland has been torn apart by the violence and destruction of the Arab Spring, and he and his family begin a long trek towards Europe. All three young people will go on harrowing journeys in search of refuge. All will face unimaginable dangers, from drownings to bombings and betrayals. But each of them, there's always the hope of tomorrow. And although Josef, Isabel, and Mahmoud are separated by continents and decades, there are surprising connections that tie all of their stories together in the end. Refugee by Alan Gratz. Echo by Pam Muñoz Ryan. The story begins with Otto, lost and alone in a forbidden forest. There he meets three mysterious sisters and suddenly finds himself entwined in a puzzling quest involving a prophecy, a promise, and a harmonica. Decades later, the novel traces the journey of the same harmonica from Friedrich in Germany to two orphan brothers, Mike and Frankie Flannery in Philadelphia, and then to a migrant worker's daughter, Ivy Maria Lopez in California. Each child has unusual musical talent and faces unique challenges in their lives. Friedrich dreams of being a conductor, but he was forced to drop out of school after the bullying that resulted from his appearance, a birthmark that covers most of his face, something that is not wanted at all in Nazi Germany. Mike is a talented pianist, and he wishes to join this band as a way to escape the orphanage and poverty while taking care of his younger brother Frankie. Ivy has just discovered her talent and love for music, but she's forced to attend a segregated school in an Americanization program for migrant children, while helping her father and mother take care of the Yamamoto family farm. The Yamamotos were forced into internment camps after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Each of these stories become interwoven when the very same harmonica lands in their lives. All of the children continue to face their challenges, but the strength of music pulls them through, and their solo stories converge in what turns into this beautiful orchestral crescendo. If you enjoy listening to audiobooks, this is an incredible audiobook because it incorporates music throughout the reading. It is very well done. Echo by Pam Muñoz Ryan. Brian Selznick's books are likely familiar to you, perhaps from having read them yourself, and if not, from having seen them on the shelf because of their huge, intimidating size. They're often remembered. However, if you had picked one up, you would find that they aren't quite as intimidating as they seem, as Selznick incorporates illustrations and text to tell a story. In The Marvels, the journey begins at sea. It's 1766, and the boy is named Billy Marvel. He survives a shipwreck and finds work in a London theater. There, his family flourishes for generations as brilliant actors, stagehands, everything involved in the theater. Until 1900. Young Leontes Marvel is banished from the stage. Nearly a century later, runaway Joseph Jervis seeks refuge with his uncle in London. Albert Nightingale's strange, beautiful house, with its mysterious portraits, ghostly presences, captivates Joseph and leads him on a search for clues about the house, his family, and the past. Once again, Brian Selznick weaves together these two beautiful stories using the illustrations in such a powerful way. The Marvels by Brian Selznick. I hope you are walking away with some great ideas for your to-be-read list. As always, these books are available to borrow or read freely online, and more information is available on the library's ebooks and audiobooks page, linked below. Thanks for listening, and hope you tune in next time. Bye!